Just having a couple of little technical issues here, guys. We'll just bear with us. All right, we're going to get started. It's just after 7 o'clock. My name is Nathan Shanks. So I'm filling in for Councillor Little tonight. So firstly, welcome everyone, elected members and Mayor Edmund and staff. I'm just going to run through with a statement of acknowledgement before we get started. We would like to acknowledge this land that we meet on today is the traditional lands for the Kaurna people, and that we respect their spiritual relationship with their country. We also acknowledge the Kaurna people as the custodians of the Greater Adelaide region, and that their cultural and heritage beliefs are still as important to the living Kaurna people today. I'll just go through and do the roll call. We only have the one apology tonight, and that's, not an apology, we have a leave of absence with Councillor Little. Is there any motions to grant leave of absence, councillors? There be none. We're moving on to public open forum. Have we got anyone in the gallery that would like to address the committee? And there be none. Can I get a mover for the confirmation of minutes for the IES meeting held on the 11th of August? Mayor Edmund, happy to move that way. Jim, happy to second. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. So business arising from minutes. Any? Oh, sorry. We also had the special IES meeting on the 17th of August. Can I get a mover for that to accept those minutes? Councillor Hughes and Jim. Councillor Vallelonga. All those in favour? All those against? It's carried. Now moving on to business arising from the minutes. Any comments on any of the items, any questions? Mayor Redmond.
Thank you, Chair. On page number 5, status update, update to reflect the adopted biodiversity management plan and open space guidelines strategic documents are required. And in the interim, there's an addendum. So when will our updated documents be completed?
Might put that one through to Sam.
Yeah, through you, Chair. I'll have to take that question on notice and provide a response back to the committee per se in terms of when we're proposing to respond to that. It's obviously been a matter that's been outstanding for a little while, but yeah, just in terms of our current operational capacities and working through when we could actually be in a position to deliver that potentially later this financial year.
Is that question something we can have answered just before the next council meeting when we're accepting these minutes?
Normally that's the intent within 1 to 2 weeks. Well, generally within 1 week we try to get the responses out. So
perfect, no worries. Any other discussion? Councillor Kosh.
Yep, thank you. Looking on page 6, Birds of Abundance, and it talks about Northern Vermin Services to carry out Birds of Abundance program. What's the program?
Yeah, through the chair. To provide some context, we recently went out to tender to engage a suitable company to control those feral pests, including birds of abundance such as pigeons and corellas, little corellas. So there's a raft of I suppose options available that they'll be implementing. Was it in relation to kind of give some little corellas? Yeah, so they've got a number of mechanisms of a clapboard and also gunshots. The caps, to move the flock on to further pastures.
Any other discussion? Councillor Goldstone.
Page 12 of 62 regarding the future report on the naming of duplicate roads. I guess the question is, can we expect that report perhaps early in the new year, or it's been 12 months, that's all.
Put that one over to you too, Ryan.
Yeah, through the chair, I know that staff are working on that report and some information around that. So it is at this stage hoping for the early in the new year.
Councillor Davies.
Yeah, just on the GM crops one, it says that the minister has to make its decision by the 15th of October. I was just wondering if we'd heard an update yet.
Sorry, what page are you on there, Cody? Oh, it's 14. Yep.
Is that in relation to the genetically modified crops, was it?
Yes.
Yes. We've lodged the submission on the 30th prior to the closing of the submissions, but at this stage we haven't yet received any information back from the minister.
Any other discussion, councillors, elected members? No, there be none. Move on to our first item for tonight. So I'm on page 19 of 62, item 7.1. We have an officer's recommendation. Mayor Redmond, you'd like to move that? Would you like to speak at all?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just briefly, thank you for the report. I think it's appropriate that we just note this report. There are some interesting ideas in here, but I think awaiting the code and the implementation of the code, I think will be quite important on how this plays out. So happy to move it.
I must apologise. We have a presentation from David Baroni as well from Jensen in regards to this item. If I can call him up to the podium there. Sorry, we're just going to check your microphone there, mate.
Okay, so I'll briefly talk through the purpose of this study, some of the rationale behind the approach that we took in coming up with the numbers that came out of the report, and also some of the findings that came out of that and the implications of that. I think I might need someone to press next. Okay, so this study was initially prepared on the basis of a ministerial DPA that was going to occur for the rail corridor, and council rightly was concerned that the investigations were unlikely to include a range of measures around understanding infrastructure as a result of infill and the uplift of development potential in these locations. So this was to provide a basis, a fundamental basis for a submission that council was to make in relation to the ministerial DPA. That was since abandoned by the minister, and so the purpose of the study shifted towards a more of a strategic focus around what growth might mean for the town centre and Gawler generally in terms of infrastructure provision and requirements. The study area, as you can see on the screen, there's effectively two locations, but the town centre historic conservation zone, the residential zone Hilly Road policy area, and the residential zone Evanston Park policy area. These areas were identified by DIPTI at the time when they did the DPA, and were driven by DIPTI. And if I can have the next slide. So the project approach and scope was fundamentally complicated a little bit because we didn't actually get a DPA to review. And so we had to then shift to using the SA Planning Policy Library and had to make some assumptions about which zones would have been applied in a particular location. Because at the time we were trying to do this concurrently with the state government doing their work. And the entire area was broken down into 4 different precincts. 3 were in the town centre, which comprised what we're calling the urban core, which is an area around the Gawler station, with the intent that that will become an urban core zone, which is the highest uplift area. The town centre Murray Street, which was the remainder of the town centre along Murray Street on that side of the river. And that would be amended to an uplifted zone that takes into account the Gawler Town Centre Design Framework recommendations, Adelaide Road, and then the residential areas, which we've dubbed the Suburban Neighborhood precinct, which is reflective of the zone that they were going to go into. So the yields were based on and established for each precinct, and the purpose of that was to understand what the implications might be for infrastructure, roads, understanding what implications of stormwater and things like that. And the floor areas and dwellings were estimated on the basis of potential development opportunities as a result of that. Now, to do that, we had to make a series of assumptions, and those assumptions were principally for development up until 2036, and we chose 2036 because that aligned with available data on traffic and projections for traffic. A couple of the other assumptions, just very quickly, all state and local heritage places will remain, contributory items will remain, and any development of those sites would occur sort of to the side or rear of those, but the original fabric of those would stay. Ground floor will be limited to retail floor space and office uses. Any first level development would be offices only. We're not anticipating retail above the ground level. And then any residential development in mixed use buildings would be above that. Some other assumptions were made in terms of an average apartment size, about 75 square metres, setbacks, and then the extent of development that might happen within that time frame. And that was a bit tricky because there was very little to go off in terms of precedents. So for the urban core precinct, because we were aware that there was a master plan for that site, it's largely in one ownership. We worked on the assumption that there will be complete redevelopment of that location. For the town centre, we used some of the growth that had occurred from uplift in Prospect Road and Churchill Road to get an understanding of what percentage of growth was occurring annually, and that was around about 1% of all of the sites. We saw that there was probably limited scope for development in the Adelaide Road precinct, and so the numbers reflected that. And then with the residential areas, we used data from DIPTI on the amount of dwellings that were being built in infill areas as replacement dwellings. And then we took take-up rates every year in terms of the number of lots that would actually really be developed based on some information from Port Adelaide Infill Council around Kilburn and Blair Athol, which have very similar housing stock to the areas in Evanston and Evanston Gardens that we were looking at. The infrastructure analysis also made some assumptions around existing data that was available, assumptions around 10 to 20% of traffic being redistributed to the Gawler East Link Road when that's built and opened, and also some assumptions around imperviousness of sites and to inform the stormwater impacts. And obviously, the other elements that we looked at were around open space networks, what implications, what's available, what's there, what implications additional populations have on that, and then historic character, what are the implications for urban form. So the first precinct is the urban core precinct. Effectively, the findings found that there would be a doubling of retail floor space, quite a big increase in commercial floor space, and potentially an additional 365 dwellings, principally in the form of apartments in a multi-storey building layout based on the zone that was identified at that time. So the implications of that are that there's about 5,800 to 7,000 additional daily vehicle trips, 930 additional car parking spaces demand as a result of that development. But because that site is largely impervious, there was really little implications in terms of additional stormwater flows. Sorry, I might need the next slide. The next precinct was Murray Street. Once again, a doubling of the retail floor space in that area was anticipated. Substantial increase, 800% of increase in commercial floor space, and potentially 529 dwellings in the form of apartments as well. Implications for that being 7,500 to 9,000 additional daily vehicle trips into and out of the centre, about 1,760 parking spaces or additional parking demand as a result of the development. And once again, because that centre is actually largely impervious, there was little implications for stormwater flows. The parking demand itself was identified as a particular concern because of what was available in the centre, and it became clear pretty quickly that there was a need for a strategic approach about how you would need to handle that additional parking demand. The next site is Adelaide Road precinct. Even though there's a limited development potential, there's 3.5 times additional retail floor area footprints, and that's principally because the retail is limited in that space. Doubling of commercial and very limited opportunities for dwellings, and that was principally driven because of the policy approach that would apply there, and that was principally in the outskirts of the precinct itself, replacing existing dwellings. So 1,500, 2,500 additional daily trips, 335 parking spaces, and once again, little implications for stormwater. Parking was less of a concern because the consultants, Tonkin Consulting, felt that it was something that can be accommodated within the existing network and within existing sites. So the next precinct is the Suburban Neighborhood precinct, which is the residential areas. And the additional dwellings that we anticipated for these areas was just over 3,000 dwellings. About 2/3 of those would be in the Evanston Gardens area, and about a third of those in Hillier Road, principally because Hillier Road, the allotments in that location are actually already smaller, so they're less likely to be subject to infill development. But there are some larger lots in that location that will be subject to land division further down the track. So the infrastructure implications more broadly across that entire area is about just under 19,000 additional vehicle trips, which is found to have huge ramifications for the arterial road network to handle those additional vehicle trips. And stormwater runoff was identified to be roughly in line with what was modelled for the Gawler and Surrounds Stormwater Management Plan, with only marginal increases. That plan already took into account potential growth based on population growth. So next slide. Potential interventions. So things that we needed to happen in order to accommodate the growth. Well, the current road network is probably the biggest thing that was identified as struggling with this. It's no surprise. It's near capacity already. The geographic features of Gawler and the historic establishment of the settlement pattern of Gawler has pretty much limited access in and out of the town centre to 4 locations. And because of that, there's going to be some restraints in what and how you can achieve the additional capacities in the road network. Some of the recommendations made by Tonkin Consulting were, well, they were principally driven by the need to solve the problem. They didn't necessarily take into account some other important factors, such as impacts on historic character, pedestrian amenity, in Murray Street in particular, on-street parking access, and things like vegetation and historic heritage buildings for particular locations. So as you can see on that slide, some of the recommendations that meant in order to include the development potential and manage the traffic volumes from development potential, duplicating Murray Street to 4 lanes, and that's from Redbanks Road all the way through to Main North Road. Alternative higher order route as another option to dealing with the traffic. Indicative route has shown on that plan, that's based on the recommendations from Tonkin Consulting. Once again, it's not necessarily ideal because it runs through some areas that would have a residential amenity, and so it's changing the order of some of the roads. Duplication of the South Parra Bridge was also needed in line with Murray Street, and upgrade to Redbanks Road. There are also recommendations to other local area traffic management treatments for particular locations to reflect the fact that there will be more traffic out and about, so to manage that to reduce rat running. One other recommendation was the construction of a multi-storey car park in the town centre to deal with the additional parking demands, and also there's identified a need to update Council's traffic and transport management plan, principally as a strategic tool to reflect the additional growth and the implications that may have. Next slide. So we also looked at the potential for flooding and stormwater. So there's existing flood-prone land already identified, and the recommendation obviously is to avoid that land and set that aside. And I think there's already existing policy in place that would enable that to happen. We've worked on the assumption that most of that land would not be developed, and that's principally in the Hillier Road policy area. With stormwater, the Gawler Stormwater Management Plan identifies some mitigation measures to deal with overland flow or stormwater management, flooding, including the Tingara Avenue flood control basin and the Evanston Oval pipe duplication. The recommendations found that if those measures are put in place, the ability for infill to occur in those locations and management of stormwater would be achievable, but coupled with that, an important assumption is that there would be on-site detention for 1 to 2 proposals, individual proposals to pre-development flows, and that's a consistent approach to most developments that occur for infill development these days anyway, and there's policy support in place already for that. In terms of opportunities, we looked at walking and cycling. The walking and cycling plan already identifies a number of key opportunities or priorities for the township, including cycle lanes along Alad Road, the Gawler Greenway, and connecting trails. We also examined opportunities for improving footpaths. The Hilly Road policy area doesn't have good quality footpaths, so there's an opportunity there, particularly with increased populations, for that to occur, as well as improved connections. With the large parcels of land, there's an opportunity to actually improve pedestrian connections between different streets to get a network of access through to open spaces and other locations, and into the railway stations too. And also for the town centre, there's a need to maintain and implement east-west connections, even more so with increased traffic volumes at the locations identified in the walking and cycling plan. So with the open space network, we identified that there's a shortage, there would be a shortage with additional development and population of about 7.5 hectares for the Hilly Road policy area and 13.6 hectares for the Evanston Gardens policy area. And what this identified is there's a need to plan ahead for any new developments that occur, particularly in the Hilly Road policy area, so that you've got a plan to get the additional open space requirements that are needed for that particular location. An approach to doing that would be to actually master plan those large lots so that when they are subdivided, you've got a plan working with the landowners to actually integrate open space and connections to that open space for neighbouring communities as well. There's also a need to strategically acquire sites where infill occurs. It's harder to provide open space in those locations because they're established settlements. And quite often the infill development in those locations is less coordinated. So there's a need to identify specific sites for acquisition. One opportunity that we saw, because there is clusters of public housing in the Evanston Gardens area, is to work with Renewal SA to actually integrate additional open space within any of their developments and their coordinated development sites. And I should also point out that for this study, we've actually not assumed access to Trinity College or the Gawler Racecourse. There's no guarantee that they actually are available for public use at all times. And typically they're not included in assessments of this nature. But obviously one recommendation for improving open space access is to get access for the general community to those spaces. And in terms of heritage and character, this was a bit of a moving beast because of the treatment and the way the code was being implemented at the time. There was a little bit of uncertainty, but there's clarity now. So the historic area overlay will continue to provide protection for heritage places and contributory items, even though they're not formally identified. The policy does talk about buildings, retention to buildings that contribute to the historic character. However, having said that, taller building forms that might be envisaged in this location particularly, for example, the urban core zone, does raise a need to be careful around how development occurs, particularly at the streetscape. So some of the things that we identified were really important were making sure that we've got consistent datums along the street with our heritage buildings, setting back taller elements of buildings that might be established in the town centre, limiting the heights to 4 stories. Now that's consistent with the town centre guidelines, but is something that is less than the standard modules that the government has, so that could be a challenge. And fine grain frontage is really important. If you've got coordinated development sites occurring that are larger in scale, making sure that you've got fine grain frontages that replicate the main street is important. screening of parking, high solid to void ratio, and then making sure that sight lines to important heritage buildings are maintained as well. One of the things that we've also recommended as part of the project is for council to introduce the local design review process. I think from our experience, early intervention to development proposals is of significant benefit, and maintaining a collaborative approach is also of significant benefit in terms of getting better outcomes and making sure that people stay on track. I personally am not a fan of the system that is proposed by the state government. I think it's overly bureaucratic and formal. I think if council can adopt something that is less formal and a lot more responsive, then proponents are much more likely to actually engage in that process, which isn't going to be compulsory. And so, final word. Next slide. So despite the abandonment of the DPA, I think this process was useful for council, in the very least, to understand some of the limitations that it faces in terms of accommodating growth, particularly in the town centre. I think there's a need for council to be strategic about how the town centre should grow and to what extent it should grow. Understanding the capacity, where the trigger points and pinch points are, could potentially help inform council about specifically where in the town centre it might want to prioritise growth and to what extent as well. Thank you. Happy to answer questions.
Thanks, David. Any questions, elected members? Councillor Tooley.
Thanks, David. It's a very comprehensive report, and I appreciate your summary. I think in there are some very profound recommendations. Two questions. In your view, is doing nothing going forward an option? I say that because this council will often market itself and says we're the fastest growing council in the state, and our population growth seems to reflect that. We've seen what happens in some towns as they grow. If they don't plan, problems occur. Others have tried to manage quite significant traffic by a bypass, and that has profound effects on the town. I mean, even Adelaide, if you look at that, they hung on with South Road for as long as they could, and eventually, and they had to sacrifice an awful lot to do that. So given what you know about the future and the growth of Gawler, do we have the option to do nothing as a council in your view?
That's the first question. Is there another question? Or
the second one is allied to that, and is action needed now?
Okay. Well, the first question, in my opinion, is easy to answer. The answer is yes, something needs to be done. I think council does need to be strategic about moving forward with the town centre and growth in the town centre. Members need to be cognizant of the fact that with the code and the new planning system, any landowner can request a code amendment. And so council doesn't necessarily have the same element of control of that process, has an opportunity to participate in the discussions, and doesn't obviously make the final decision on that. So I think being informed about those things, yeah, definitely. In terms of now, that's a little bit more difficult to answer because obviously things have changed since we've written this report significantly. I think initially there's a need to be strategic around some of the studies around the traffic and transport management plan, understanding the trigger points and exactly what you can get away with and what the options are, because there are a range of different options, but it's a combination of those different options that was most likely to be a solution here. I mean, for example, duplication of Murray Street is not going to be really a feasible option because of the implications that has. So for me, that's a discussion around what are the options out there, what best fits, and I think it's a discussion that probably needs to be had with the community too.
Sorry, I just had a question, if I may. With the Gawler Link Road coming online, are you able just to explain what that'll do to the data and how that's affected what you've gathered and the predictions to come?
Well, I'm not a transport engineer, but the engineers that we engaged as part of our team did take into account that the additional traffic volumes that would actually pick up. I think it's in the order of about between 10 to 20% of traffic volumes, and that was included in the modelling.
Mayor Redmond, you had a question?
It sort of follows on from your question, Chair, around just taking into account other activities as part of the growth, because it's not just the town centre that's impacted by growth. It's other growth like Springwood, but also Roseworthy, southern areas that are getting more shopping areas. So was there any consideration of those developments which will ease the pressure off Murray Street and the town centre?
Yeah, the consultants did actually take into account growth within those neighbouring locations. I'd have to double check, but I think they also included opportunities that are afforded in Concordia. With the growth of those locations, there's an opportunity for some of the demand to be dispersed to other locations, other centres, to deal with particular forms of journeys, retail journeys. And that's potentially a strategy around how Gawler can actually manage the additional growth. It's a point of difference.
Follow-up question there,
So we've had a big focus on accessibility, walking, pedestrian access, particularly around, well, you know, wanting to link Gawler. You've made a cursory mention of that, but you haven't really delved into that in the town centre, and you focused on cars. So why have you not incorporated opportunities for, you know, improving the walkability?
Well, certainly walkability is important, both for the feel of the centre, and you know, development would need to respond to that. Increased pedestrian traffic is obviously going to have implications for, you know, existing footpaths. The assessment did take into account the benefit of people living in the centre, and that actually drove reductions in overall demand for traffic and transport, and because people would be walking and cycling. Certainly from our perspective, connections to the centre would be important, and certainly that's from the cycling and walking plans, the recommendations that were made in that, I think will become even more important as a way of alleviating some of the traffic volumes. We didn't venture into too much detail into that particular one.
Councillor Koch.
Might be a question for Ryan. Page 26 of 62, the first paragraph talks about funding and required changes by DPA, and talks about, I suppose, different funding models. Could you just give an explanation or sort of commentary on that?
Yeah, through the chair. Obviously, as part of the initial scope of this investigation, which was in response to the ministerial DPA, a part of this analysis was not only to identify what type of infrastructure augmentation may be necessary to support the intended future use of the land, it was also to establish the costs associated with that infrastructure, and then seek to apply that where possible to the beneficiaries of that uplift. So if there was a landowner that was going to get a significant benefit from that uplift, and that uplift was going to have a direct nexus to infrastructure requirements or infrastructure upgrades that are as a direct consequence of that development, well, then there's an opportunity to work with that developer to get a more sustainable outcome for both the delivery and funding of infrastructure. So much like we've done for the Gawler East area, where we've identified the infrastructure that's required to support a sustainable community, we've then sought to apply that to the beneficiaries of that land and achieve a more robust and sustainable financial model for the community.
Councillor Fraser.
First of all, David, I'd like to thank you for your report. It's very thorough. I do understand that it was about Gawler and the Gawler area. My biggest concern is the impact of the new developments on our doorstep regarding transit and parking. And it is my belief that the government needs to look at extending the train line out to Roseworthy and to Concordia, because they say that these developments are close to the main road and the bypass, and people will use that. Not everybody's going to use that. They're going to want to come into Gawler and park all day and catch the train. And I can't see where the people of Gawler should be paying $10 million for a car park that's going to be used by Roseworthy and Concordia. And I think that's something that we really and truly need to get on board with the government and push it, that those train lines are there, they just need to be brought up to scratch and used.
Couldn't agree more. Any further questions? No, there be none. Thank you very much again, David. Councillor Hughes, you're happy to second that motion? Would you like to speak?
Yeah, I agree. It's an important strategic document. I think it actually shows the potential growth of the Main Street area, the importance of extra car parking for that growth if we're going to double and in some cases quadruple some of the area space, which is part of that plan. But I think it's a handy document for us for future growth of the town. So yeah, for any future work in the town, I think it's quite a handy document. So happy to note the report.
Any further discussion, elected members? Councillor Tooley.
If I could start with two questions. First of all, just a clarification on the financial. Did this report cost us more than $50,000?
Ryan, if I can pass that one to you.
Through the chair, no, but that came in within budget.
So that's what's a bit ambiguous. It says that there was a budget of 50,000 and it says there's an amount of 4,000 still to be paid. So would the community look at that and say that pretty well the 50,000 was expended on the report?
The chair, that's my understanding, yes.
Okay, thank you. Second question, if I might. It's the implications of the word notes. Could I have what will that mean if we simply tonight note this $50,000 report? What does that mean? Does it just sit on the shelf like so many other reports before, either to be forgotten or to be brought back and told it's not a strategic document because we've never accepted it, it's just a noted report? So before we vote on this, we need to know what the implications of that word, we note the report, please.
Do you want one? Henry?
Yeah, through the chair, if I could. As has been explained, the original genesis of the report was in response to the state government progressing to prepare and by way of a DPA zoning proposition. And as has been referenced by the consultant, that then changed and where the state government advised, no, they're not proceeding. However, the decision was made to continue with the study to inform council of what could have been the consequences and prepare ourselves for future if in the event that the state government reconnects with the proposition of the corridor uplift, or there are other interested parties. Now, the intention of the recommendation was for noting purposes, because at this point, there's not envisaged an immediate action to follow. And I would suggest that that's an appropriate resolution of council in terms of noting, because again, there's no immediate understanding of any policy changes or pursued by state government. However, if members wish to give it some more focus, endorsement in principle, or seek to pursue some other sort of level of investigation further to this report, then well, that's the purpose of this conversation. But I would be comfortable and am comfortable with the fact that at this point, it's more than appropriate for council to note the report.
Follow-up question there, Councillor Tooley.
I'd like to make an amendment, perhaps. I might need some help to do that, but I think we had an opportunity to stop this when the government DPI decided to pull the plug. We could have stopped that and saved a lot of money. We didn't. We've seen this through to the end. This has cost us $50,000 of ratepayer money. Our previous Jensen reports didn't cost us that much, and we know how contentious they were sitting on the shelf. This is a very comprehensive document. It is the sort of document that we need to plan. Doing nothing is not possible. So I'd like some help. I would like this to be more as an accepted document for future reference, whether we endorse it as a future for future planning purposes, or we endorse it for future workshops, because this needs an opportunity for us to come back and really tease out which of these recommendations really have some future for us. Because doing nothing is not an option, and I don't want this to sit on the shelf. So I'd like some help with some wording. That's my gist. I'd like us to endorse it, accept it and endorse it for future strategic reference.
Point of order, Mayor Redmond.
If you change the wording from note to endorse, that's an alternative motion, it's not an amendment. Amendment is a minor variation that significantly changes it, that is an alternative motion. It's not an amendment.
Yeah, I'm not going to uphold that one. Councillor Tooley's just seeking some assistance in some wording here, so I think we can come to an agreement that will have an outcome. I guess my initial thoughts are that we are noting the report as it sits, and a future workshop to be held on the strategic implementation of said plan. How does that sit as a 2-point? Councillor Tooley. Sorry.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate the help on that. I think that would be good, but we should make it a recommendation to council in that sense, I think, because this is it shouldn't just sit at the committee level. I think this should come before council. You know, we often recommend that council accept the motion. I think if we could add that into your wording, I think we're getting close to what my ambition is, yeah.
So are we able to get that wording put into a 2-point of that recommendation there? Yeah. Are we able to can put it up on the screen and then see, yeah, your thoughts on the matter. Yep, no, that's fine. We'll just put it up on the screen and then, yeah, I'll give you the option to reject it. It's all good. So we have some further points added to the recommendation. Is this covering the intent at all, Councillor Tooley?
Thank you. Yeah, look, I think it's, from my point of view, it's a better recommendation. It is acknowledging, as we do in most of our big decisions.
Sorry, Ian, I'll just double check with the wording before we speak to it, if that's all right. So you're happy with this? I might just put it to the mover and the seconder if they're going to accept to add the extra points. If not, we might chase an amendment. Is that okay?
Yeah, all I was...
You're happy with the wording? That's all I'm checking.
I was just talking about the wording.
But I'm just going to put it to you're not accepting it. So would you like to put up an amendment then, Councillor Tooley?
Process is always tricky, isn't it?
It is, yes.
It shouldn't get in the way of a good decision, though. So am I being asked to move this as an amendment? Is that what you're asking?
Yes, the mover and seconder. The mover has not accepted the wording change.
Okay, so yes, I'd like to move that as an amendment then, if that's the way forward, yeah.
So I'll put that amendment. I need a seconder for the amendment. Councillor Davies, would you like to speak? And just remember that if you're speaking to the amendment.
I haven't spoken yet, either.
Bear with me, guys, my apologies. Councillor Tooley, would you like to speak to your motion?
To my amendment? Yes, I would. Thank you.
To your amendment.
Thank you. Yeah. Yeah, look, I hope councillors will support this. The reason I think it's a better wording is that, yes, it does acknowledge the work, but it's the next step that I think is, well, there's two important things. We're recommending this to council, and we should always do that with big decisions. This is a very expensive document, $50,000. It is a very good document. It's a very big document. It provides a lot of good strategic thinking that should stimulate our further thinking about planning going forward. So to recommend it to council, I think is a good thing. We're noting it, but the second part is better than we had before, because we're acknowledging the report can then form the basis for further strategic considerations. I don't know if you or I use that word relative to future growth management, but I suppose what that means is that we can bring that forward in the not too distant future because we are facing growth. And as my question to David about, can we do nothing? We will be bursting at the seams if we do nothing. And therefore, if we're going to plan, we need this type of document to inform us. We won't like everything that's in there. And I don't think it was ever developed that way, but it's given us some fantastic options to think of. And we have to solve the problems. If we don't, doing nothing is just not an option. I mean, I've lived here since 1980. We've never solved the Main Street issue. How many reports are on shelves in there about where they've tried to do that, and it just hasn't solved it, and with the added pressure. And we've got no guarantee with St. Ives. I drove past there the other day with St. Ives and the others coming on board. We're not going to be able to stop these people coming in. It's why Woolworths and all the big businesses centred here. We are a regional centre. That's a very good thing for business, but it brings with it challenges. Park and ride, Councillor Fraser talked about investments in park and ride. We have invested in some big parks already, but we can do that and make money if we do it in partnership with developers and actually not turn it into a money-making venture so it pays for itself, because we will have the electrified railway line at the end of the street. And I agree with the vision to take the railway forward, but we can't put all our hopes on that, because even the big players like Leighton Holdings have tried, and they've got a lot more leverage, I think, than we have, but I don't see that the government's budged on that yet. So we have to act in the now, in what's facing us, and I think this is a really good strategic document to guide us. I'd like it to come back before us in workshops as we talk it through, because that's our job as council. People ring us about these issues, business issues, planning issues, parking issues. That's our job. So this shouldn't just become something that gathers dust. It should be an active document. We've invested our ratepayers' money in it, and we should be using it. So I hope people will support this. I think this is a better motion, and it takes us more into that realm. Thank you.
Councillor Davies, you're happy to second?
Yeah, look, for me, I think this just looks like the motion as it was, except it's a bit more comprehensive. It does cover what the report does talk about. Like at the end of the report here with risk evaluation, it says identifying risks. I'll just read it out. Gawler already experiences infrastructure at capacity issue. A failure to anticipate the effects of growth on the community could result in loss of character, heritage, sustainability and livability, and public safety and health issues for the township. So coming back to these documents that cover, how we would be affected by growth issues when we know we're going to have growth is, I think, fairly common sense to me.
Any further discussion, elected members? Councillor Goldstein.
Look, I support what Councillor Toole is trying to achieve. I'm not too happy with the actual amended recommendation. I think it could have been done a lot more simply by just adding a few words onto the existing officer's recommendation. I'm not too keen on the words form the basis of. We could have simply added for future reference and strategic planning purposes onto the officer's recommendation, which would have achieved, I think, what Councillor Tory was trying to get without altering the intent of the original recommendation. But so I think I'll have to vote against this, but if it gets up, it gets up. If it doesn't, I'll probably look at moving it.
There's some wording recommendations you'd like to give Councillor Tooley, maybe?
What I was suggesting was the officer's recommendation up the top remain with some added words for future reference and strategic planning purposes. So the original recommendation that the infrastructure notes the call out of analysis update for future reference and strategic planning purposes. I mean, I agree, we don't want it to just sit there and disappear, or, you know, we should be referring to it for future strategic purposes, but and I think that achieves that without altering the intent of the original recommendation.
Happy for you to provide feedback on that one, Councillor Tooley.
Look, I appreciate that. The reason I won't accept that as a change to the amendment, it might be something that comes up if my motion's lost. If we could just roll up to my amendment, to go back to the original with only doing that, we don't do the right thing by my mind and recommend to council. I think what Councillor Goldstone is perhaps a little bit worried about is the wording that the CEO recommended to the Secretary, which is a little bit different to what you spoke of, Councillor Shanks, could be achieved if acknowledged that the report is to form the basis of, I think that's the concern Councillor Goldstone has, that could be changed to acknowledge that the report be used strategically for, that's going to be clumsy, but that's, I think, I'm happy to tone the language down, because I think the fear was that the words that the CEO used might give it a higher status than I think Councillor Goldstone wants. Be used strategically for further strategic. Yeah, that's not bad, except we're using strategically twice. That acknowledges that the report be used strategically for future considerations relative
for future strategical planning.
Acknowledge that the report be used strategically for future considerations relative to future growth management. Yeah.
Yeah, Councillor Koch, I hear what you're saying, but we might even get a good motion out of this that might see a unanimous decision. Who knows? So bear with me, would you? So we've got acknowledges that a report be used strategically for future considerations relative to future growth management.
Relative to planning associated with future growth management.
Councillor Goldstone, does that satisfy you? Mercy.
Is he given a blessing?
No. Okay, well, I think we might be going around in circles here, so I think the wording is, yeah, we'll have to see how we go. Any further comments on it as it sits at the moment? There being none, Councillor Tooley, would you like to close the debate? Oh, sorry. So how do we put this to vote? Okay. Can I just get a check on that, if that's all right? I'm not saying I don't trust you, Mayor Edmund, obviously, but oh, you're reading the, okay, no worries. I will put that to the vote then. All those in favour of the amendment as it sits? All those against? The motion is carried.
You vote as well, Chair.
It's carried either way, but yes, that becomes the motion. And now we move on, do we? Okay, no worries. So any further discussion? And Mayor Edmund, you close the debate.
Thank you. Yeah, look, good discussion. I think that this report has some very controversial ideas, particularly the 4-lane highway through the main street, the duplication of the bridge, the potential bypass using Julian Terrace and then up Jerningham and then around up along Victoria Terrace. There's some real issues, the 4-lane highway up Redbanks Road. If we value heritage, this doesn't cut it. So I think that there are some real issues. I think it is important to plan strategically and how we go forward. This is just one report and we don't necessarily have to deliver everything that is in this report, but I do think that it is quite challenging for people that value heritage, which is a brand of our town. So I am a little bit disappointed with the report. I think that it is quite controversial and it may well deliver what we don't want as we go forward. And it doesn't take into account, I don't believe, other areas of growth and different commercial precincts that will be developed as a result of that growth, which will change the nature of this report. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mayor Edmund. So we're not voting on any. Oh, we do. So we're voting on the motion. All those in favour? And all those against? And the motion is carried. Mayor Edmund has called a division. Can I get all those in favour to stand? So all those in favour working around the table, Councillor Davies, Councillor Goldstone, Councillor Vallelonga, Councillor Tooley, Councillor Samble, Councillor Fraser. All those against, Councillor Kosh, Councillor Hughes and Councillor Redmond. Mayor Redmond, my apologies. And Councillor Shanks was also for in favour of the motion. So against was Mayor Redmond, Councillor Hughes and Councillor Kosh. The motion is carried. Okay, moving on. Page 29, item 7.2. We have an officer's recommendation. Mayor Edmund, you'd like to move that way?
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to move that way and I'd like to add in point 5 that we include an open house session for the community, that an open house session for the community be arranged in Williston at a suitable venue as part of the public consultation.
I'm going to take you, are you able just to type that in there under number 5?
I mean, it could be part of number 5 or an extra point, it doesn't matter, I guess. But
Point 5, yeah, on page 29.
okay. So if I'll just happily.
Yeah, I'm happy.
Yeah, thank you, Zach, for this piece of work. 242 people from the Williston area responded to the survey. I read every single survey, and I think the report does capture some of the issues, certainly around Main North Road, Williston and Redbanks Road, which are state government arterial roads. I don't think the report captures the pedestrian accessibility, and I don't think the opportunities for pedestrian havens and accessibility, particularly across those roads, has been fully captured. Certainly some of the issues around connectivity and pinch points, for example, Princess Street, Main North Road, and then Princess Street, Redbanks Road, and then the roundabout at Haynes Road, and of course the Williston roundabout at the hotel. I think that's been detailed really well from the community consultation. Certainly, I think the community needs to look at this report and provide further feedback. I think that there's opportunity, particularly around the Princess Street and Main North Road intersection. I don't think we should be closing roads, but I think structures like roundabouts should be considered. I think in the report it does talk about a cost-effective exercise. I think we should look at an effective exercise rather than a cost-effective exercise, because it may mean that we ultimately end up saving money if we actually get the treatments right for some of these intersections. But particularly around accessibility, for example, in the report it talks about an opportunity to put a pedestrian haven at the corner of Davies Street and Main North Road, which forks. And then there's no further pedestrian haven until you get down near the roundabout, and I think that that's a missed opportunity. I think that the walking and cycling plan could be challenged in that regard. I think there are some better connectivity, particularly around cycling, and it's, so I think there's further feedback that we can get, and I look forward to hearing what the community has to say, and certainly they're quite interested. They wouldn't have responded. It was quite a high uptake rate, and I think that if we give our community a further opportunity through an open house session, face to face, I think they'll take that up. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, I agree, and I think it's going to also tie back into the Roseworthy growth as well, those entrance points. How have I got a second there? Councillor Tooley.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I'm happy to second that. Happy to see that wording added. I think the similarities between the report that we were just looking at, and this report. I don't think we're going to accept every one of the recommendations or possibilities that are here, but I think the report flags a lot, and it has picked up on the extensive community consultation. So the additional feedback now is hopefully going to be used to help us refine what we actually do. Some of those intersections with the Main North Road, is it Princess Street? Did you mention Princess Street? That's used quite heavily as it comes up. Is that the park at the end, which we call the Lime Park or something? Yeah, Princess Street, yeah. I'm a frequent user of that, so I know firsthand the challenges there. And I think we've acknowledged before that Williston seems to have, in some ways, been forgotten in a lot of the planning, and it's being impacted significantly. I think this is a good strategy. I hope we can do the same with the report that we were just debating. I think that would be great to get down the track. We might recommend a workshop for that, because input on those really big thinking ticket items would be great. Nobody wants a 4-lane highway down the main street. That's not going to happen, and it won't be supported. It's in there for strategic thinking, and just like not everything in this is going to be taken up. There's not going to be roundabouts in every place that they put them. There's not going to be the road softening techniques in every street that's recommended. But this is a fantastic way for us to plan by taking the community's input and then refining that, looking at the financial constraints, working with, those that control major arterial roads and those that are local roads. So I think this is a good strategy. It's a good way forward. And I think holding the feedback session in that Williston area, I don't know if we've got a big enough hall over that way, but we'll have to find one. Which one?
Footy Club, yeah.
Oh, Footy Club, of course, yeah. Yeah. So yes, happy to second.
Any further discussion, elected members? Councillor Fraser.
I understand the reasons behind the study taking so long to be done, but it is 8 years since it was first, which is an awful long time. And then I understand the frustrations of the people that live in Williston with it. But on page 34.3, that's just another example that we need to somehow get out there to the residents that this is not a council road, this is a government road, and the government need to be held responsible for their roads. They're just not good enough, basically.
We also have the consultant available on Zoom as well. Just dialed in if there's any questions directly for the consultant elected members. Those who have spoken can still ask the questions. And welcome, Jane. Can you hear us? So I'll just put
Hello, everybody.
How are you going? I'm just going to put you over to Mayor Karen Redmond. She's got a question for you.
Thank you, Chair. I'm on page 34 of 62 of the agenda, and I'm looking at the dot points and numbers in addition to proposed speed management, etc. And down on point 17, it's got investigate benefit costs for realignment of Kelly's Road, Paxton Street intersection. That didn't come up at all in the community consultation. And I couldn't quite see why that's been included as a priority. Could we just have some information as to why that is the case, why that's been included? Because I just didn't get a sense that was an issue.
Sorry, I missed the intersection. I don't actually have a copy of the page numbering from your agenda, unfortunately. So I'll just have to do a quick search on my report, but I missed the intersection that you were referring to.
So Kelly's Road, it's down in the industrial area. It's the intersection of Paxton Street and Kelly's Road. So that's down the bottom of the industrial park area.
It was actually raised in the consultation as one of the comments. Somebody had identified that there was they had a concern that typically people that are travelling down Kelly's Road turn left into Paxton Street, but on occasion they go straight through, and because the priority of the intersection is as a standard T, but the volume of traffic that actually continued down into the dead end section of Kelly's Road is relatively low. That's quite a common safety concern that gets raised, because people essentially become habitualised to everybody always making a left turn and presume that the next person that comes along is going to do the same. The reason that that it was included in sort of towards the end of the longer term treatments is that it's not really what I would consider to be a high priority safety issue for council. There are a lot of other safety interventions which I believe you would want to prioritise above that. But if there's being work done on that end of Paxton Road, there certainly is an opportunity to look at the alignment of that intersection to suit the priority traffic movement.
It is a T-junction, and I just question the apart from industrial park traffic and the odd football game, and most people would probably take the other road, but well, the River Road, they might come down Paxton Street, but I doubt that they would. But yeah, I just didn't understand why we'd need to focus on that, because I do know that area quite well. Anyway, yeah, I didn't pick that up I read every response, and I think there was only one person that mentioned it. Is that right?
That's right. It was one person. Where something was raised by the community, even if it was only a small number of people that raised it, we also then took a technical assessment as to what the sort of the data reasoning might be behind the concern that had been raised. And as I said, the majority traffic flow would be Kelly Street north into Paxton Street. And so ideally, from, if you were going to replan Williston and start from scratch, that priority would have been built into that intersection as a realigned T rather than a standard T. But I agree with you that the priority of it is well down the pecking order, if you like, and it would be probably a case that you would want to go out and have a look at the nature of the vehicles that are making that movement and whether there's an interaction between domestic vehicles and truck traffic that would warrant a significant enough safety issue that an intervention would be installed there.
Follow-up question?
I just would hate to think that would take priority over more common issues that were raised.
Have we got any further questions for Jane while we have her on the line? I think you've gotten out of this one lightly, Jane, to be honest. So yes, probably good that you zoomed in. Thank you very much for making the effort, and yeah, thanks for answering the questions.
No problem. Thank you.
So we have a mover to seconder. Is there any further discussion on this item, elected members? There be none. Are you happy to close the debate? So I'm going to put that, all those in favour? Carried unanimously. We're on item 7.3. On page 38, we have an officer's recommendation there. Councillor Toole, are you happy to move that?
Yes, and with a slight change of wording that we recommend to council, that we note, and then we can point to support. So we just change the first sentence would be to what I'd like to move. And do I talk to it now?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. I think this report has shown that there are some strategic and financial advantages to piggyback with the scheduled pruning that the electorate, etc. do. We have obligations, and therefore it saves the duplication. I think that's essentially the way I'm reading it, that we're saying, well, we'll pay a contribution, but we'll get the bits that we need done that you wouldn't normally do. So I think that's a good thing. It's not really captured in the report, I guess, but I think we've got to do better with some of our street planning. You know, what we're doing to those trees on Lindop Road is just diabolical. They will die soon, they're stressed now, and just the continual, there was the wrong tree, just totally the wrong tree in the area. And we've got to be better at what we plant, so we minimise the need for this type of planting, because they look awful. The shape is disgusting. It's one of our main avenues, and we're talking about, you know, our entrances and beautifying our town. And we've all driven around other communities and looked at the street trees that they use that are much smaller, much more appropriate for that type of thing. But to put that type of gum tree there was just a very poor decision, and we're now paying for it. And electorate are paying for it. So I make that as a comment that I hope is taken on board, that we're just better in planting our street trees. Okay, but yeah, the report, I think, speaks for itself. It's a good one. Thank you.
Thank you. Looking for a seconder. Councillor Samuel, would you like to speak?
Yes, thanks, I'm just wondering how old we've got to be before we bite the bullet about the trees that are around the streets in this town. I had the pleasure of taking senior staff for a drive the other day and pointed these things out. And Councillor Fraser would know too that this discussion's been going on and on and on. And I support this motion, because when are we going to bite the bullet and those trees that were planted willy-nilly by a load of school kids many years ago up Lindop Road, and they are costing this council and ratepayers money every year. The 20,000 you're paying for this year, you probably will be paying 30 next year, and so forth. There's so many trees. Go up Creek Road, like I saw tonight, because people complained about the high grasses around the blocks. And while I was standing there, a truck came down the road and broke off a branch of the tree. The ugly trees are hanging over the road. I think we've got a fantastic person, team leader in Paul, and surely we should get behind and say, let's bite the bullet now and get rid of the trees that are not suitable for this town. We have a beautiful town. Have a look at the Gawler hybrid bottle brush, the prunus. Have a look at 19th Street, you know, the Queensland bohemias that are coming out in flower now. I feel proud to just drive down it, to have the feel of it. But get rid of those that every year, Electronet and us have got to cut. We've got to bite the bullet. I'll support this motion, but let's get serious, councillor, because it's a real mess, as Councillor Tully said. When you come from the Barossa Valley, you see the junkyard on the right that council got no power over doing anything about, and then you come into the top of the hill, and what the hell is this? Boomerang gum trees, you know. We've got to change it. We've got to do it. Let's the year start now.
There's a section in the agenda, Brian, called motions without notice. Just chucking it out there anyway. Councillor Kosh.
Yeah, look, I'll be supporting it, but I want to make a couple of comments. It's disappointing that SAP networks don't actually prune to Australian standards. We actually have Australian standards in arboriculture, and it's a shame that they don't and been let off the hook. Because a lot of the issues that we see would be solved if they prune to Australian standards. We're also concerned, and I hope that we have a bit of a watching brief about this, when I look at page 40 of 62, and I look at the volume of branches, you know, material that's actually pruned off there, I sort of wonder whether that's a healthy outcome for those trees. Because what happens is, if you prune lightly, say around about 10%, you don't initiate new growth. And when you have older trees like this, and you extensively prune, you actually take away what's called the apical dominance, and you get extra growth, and you trigger the plant into growth again, which puts stress on the tree. So, and then it goes into vigour and it puts up a lot of growth again. So by actually pruning very lightly, like no more than 10%, you can actually keep the tree in a state that it can just sit there and be quite stable, and you won't initiate new growth. Because with veteran trees, older trees, when you initiate new growth, it actually takes a lot of their stored energy away. You have large cuts, they're open to diseases, etc., etc. So although that looks pleasing to the eye, and unfortunately that's what amenity pruning is, it's sort of a pleasing to the eye thing, it may not be the most healthy thing for the trees from a physiological point of view, especially with older trees. So I would hope that we just have a bit of a watching brief on the effects of the pruning and whether we get a lot of epicomal new growth, and what if that puts any stress on those trees long term, because long term that can actually affect its health, especially older trees. So, and I do find it interesting that when people look at a tree, they it's lopsided, but in reality the tree has actually grown with tension and compression wood, so it's not going to fall over. It just looks in a person's eye to be lopsided and unpleasant. And there's a term in landscaping called unresolved dualities, when something is at odds with the eye's mind and people want to react, and this is a different characteristic or view onto a tree, or a tree where it doesn't necessarily have to, and it may cause long-term physiological damage to the tree. So that's just a point of warning, a point of concern I have, and I hope that we're not damaging the tree by this excessive pruning, just so it looks pretty. Thank you.
Any other discussion, Councillor Fraser?
Yeah, I have a question that if I can, to Councillor Kosh, being an arborist. The trees on Lindog Road, are they like they are because the way ETSA pruned them, And they are actually quite suitable trees. It's just the way they've been treated. Yeah. Will they ever get any better? No, not now. No. Okay. Thank you.
Happy for you to answer that if you want. I know you're itching. No? No? Okay. Moving on, is there any further discussion? There be none. Councillor Tolley, are you happy to close the debate? I'll put that motion. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. So moving on to item 7.4, we're on page 44. We have as officer's recommendation, elected members. Mayor Edmund, happy to move. Would you like to speak?
Thank you. Yes, thank you, Chair. Thank you for this report, Jack Darzanos. Certainly the Environmental Health Services team have been quite busy the last 6 months for obvious reasons. In addition to their normal work, they've had to take on a lot of compliance work as part of the COVID-19 crisis, so I applaud them for that. There's been some really positive feedback from both residents and businesses on the caring nature of the staff and working with businesses, which has been really quite challenging because of the directions of SA Health and the state government, for good reason. We've had to fall into line, but it does mean that local government and this particular team have worked very hard, so I congratulate them. Thank you.
You happy to second, Councillor Sam?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, and to endorse those words that the Mayor has said, because it's certainly been some trying times, and I know with different people that I've spoken to, and also to staff that I've spoken to, is under the leadership team that we've got with Mr. Darzen, and that I believe that, and the support of senior management, and it is one of the reasons that I think Gawler is as safe as it is, and very proud to be part of it.
I'm actually glad that you guys brought that up. I was going to ask the question so that that sentiment could be put forward, because I'm also getting that feedback from staff out in the community. So it is good to see. Yeah, keep up the good work. Any further discussion? Councillor Tooley.
A question first. Page 52 of 62, the increases that we can see just in the chart on the top of the page, is the belief that that's mainly linked to this weird world that we're in this year, that we're seeing an increased number of notices and warnings issued? Is the feeling that it's mainly the COVID related, or does staff think there's other factors?
I might put that one to you, Jack, if that's all right. I can see you nodding away.
Yes. Through the chair. To a degree, yes. The wastewater warnings are an increase due to basically the officers doing a lot of background checks into wastewater systems that we weren't aware of, that are quite old and are still operating in areas which are actually sewered in Gawler. So we're doing a compliance check of these systems which need to be connected to the sewer and maintained appropriately. So hence the increase in that. It was a special targeted program this year in amongst the whole COVID project as well program.
Yeah. Thank you, Jack. Follow-up question?
No, I'll speak to them. Yeah, yeah, I think it's a very good report. I think the only thing I'm disappointed in is that, again, we're only noting it, because to me, if we give this a bit more status and take it to council, yeah, there's a greater chance the media will pick up on it. And I think this is a good news story. I've heard the same things. People have spoken very favourably of the way our staff go about it. They are certainly keeping an eye on the appropriate things. You know, it's been very intense as COVID was even more intense, and they were keeping us safe and the community safe by doing their checks, working with businesses, working with people, doing it very appropriately. I've had no complaints. You'd think you might get some that says the officers were too aggressive or too keen or whatever. That hasn't been the case. And this backs up the regular reports that we've been issued. There's always been a part of those reports which is about the compliance and about the health and safety checks. So that's my only, I guess, disappointment in the motion, is that I do think this should be given more profile. It is a good report. It's a good news story in the sense that we're doing the job well as a council. And it'd be nice, for the media to get it. It'll be there if we note it, but if we make a recommendation and then it has to have a discussion, we get the chance to talk it up as the media are listening, because they may not be listening tonight.
Any further discussion? So are you happy to close the debate? I'll put that motion. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Now we're on item 7.5, page 60 of 62. We have an officer's recommendation. Councillor Hughes, you're happy to move that way? Would you like to speak? Do I have a seconder? Councillor Goldstone, would you like to speak? Any further discussion? I'm going to put that motion. All those in favour? And all those against? The motion is carried. Councillor Hughes has called a division. All those in favour, can you please stand? And it seems that it is now carried unanimously. I still need a name. I still need a name, everyone. Sorry, everyone still needs to stand. So I'm starting with Councillor Hughes, Councillor Samble, Councillor Fraser, Mayor Redburn, Councillor Davies, Councillor Kosh, Councillor Goldstone, Councillor Vallelonga, and last chance, Councillor Tooley. Yep, Councillor Tooley, and also Councillor Shanks. The motion is carried. Thank you, councillors. And the Mayor. Moving on. That concludes all our officers' reports. Items listed for discussion. We don't have any in there. Items listed for discussion at future meetings. Again, we have nothing listed. Am I? No, not yet. No. So items listed for discussions at future meetings.
Thank you, Chairman. Look, there's a couple of things to do with house blocks and things that happen around the town. Now, I don't know whether I'm the only one that gets phone calls, and it's one of those things where I reckon it could be a good discussion about who does actually ring elected members about different things. I mean, I'm just, answering the calls all the time until my phone crapped up the other day. And basically, it's all about the blocks that are up as high as this table all around this town. Go up Creek Road, for instance, where I was tonight and met with 3 people there. I've met with executives and said, well, yes, there's a procedure. Oh, I love that rule book called procedure. But you've got to send a notice out, then you've got to wait. It's ridiculous because when the grass is this high and then it's cut, it lays on the ground and it's just as bad as it being that high because all of that grass is there ready to ignite. And if you want to see a classic example, go down to where the Kelvin's Ugly Roundabout is on down Wright Street. And then when you start to go down the hill, or hang on with this one, when you come over the Overway Bridge, have a look at the brand new building on the left there where the grass is this high, as I think it grew today because it's hot. Then you go down Ride Street and head towards the bypass, and on the left, just imagine the fires that we had in Gippsland. If that catches on fire, all of Gawler West is going to go. You know, you've got to go and see these things. That's what people are ringing me about. And you know, like, as a councillor, when they ring you, you must go and have a look at what's going on. And nothing's happening. So how much longer does it go on? So discussion for future meetings certainly about that and untidy houses around the town. I showed the executive the other day of 2 or 3, one in Courtney Street is a classic. You want to see it. Had a problem with one in Holmes Street, and the efficiency of the staff that are in charge of that thing, I rang. They answered me within 10 minutes and said, yes, it's a housing trust home. It's somebody that's got out of jail that's living in there, in Holmes Street, right? You want to see the backyard. It's full of rats, and the rats have been coming into the neighbours. And the woman rings me and said, I've been phoning for 6 months, and no one's done something. In 5 days, it was done. Because of the staff member, I'm sorry, I can't remember the staff member's name, but whoever's to do with that, it can be done. I mean, do we as councillors understand that when a ratepayer's got a problem, is what do we do about it? How do we go about it? So I'm sort of saying, I think there's an opportunity there where we could get to know a lot more about what we can do, and Kelvin might get his roundabout fixed up and all that sort of stuff. They're the sort of things to sort of discuss and that. Yeah, okay. Thank you.
So you're happy with the wording up there, Councillor Sample? Talking about house blocks and weeds, untidy houses. I think you also touched on the potential for the interface between us and the community and staff.
Yes, please, yeah. I think especially new elected members, because you're all very enthusiastic, but do we know what direction we head to? We just don't go to the seniors, because under them are people that are doing the job and so forth. We don't even know what they look like. People have met me and Woolwich. G'day, Sambo, how you going? You know, oh, sorry, I can't remember your name. I work for council. You know, when I was mayor, we used to be able to go as elected members. We're sworn to secrecy all the time. Councillor Fraser will remember this. The mayor will remember this. We could go into our computers, which it's all totally confidential, and we could see the name of the person, the job that they're employed at this council, a picture of their beautiful faces, and so forth. We know who works for council. And we know as elected members, we're going to say, wow, how you going? Look, thanks so much. This woman I spoke to on the phone that fixed the house up in Hollis Avenue, I still don't know what she looks like, but I hope one day I can meet her to personally elbow her and say thank you very, very much. Because she fixed, and these people are very rich people that own the house, and their daughter lives in the house, and they actually rang me too and said, I can't believe that you could have fixed that up in 4 days. Now, that's what we're here for. That's why we're voting in as elected members. And that sort of thing, I think, is important to know, and also to know who works for us. 137 people. I know these 3, you know, I've seen them before, and so forth, but do you know the rest? Do you know the rest? I know Megan. She got me a lovely meal tonight. But, you know.
Yeah, look, I can take on board what you're saying. I'm trying to juggle those phone calls myself along with a career, so I will invite any help on how to do that. That's
Yeah, I'll endorse what Councillor Sample said there, and a thanks to the staff. I had the same thing. Local community member rang me, and within days, I think it was almost the second day, they had someone out. Sam had sent someone out, and then a matter of days later, my neighbour came over and said, it's fantastic, that bit's been done, that bit's been done. I think we emailed a thanks back via Sam to the staff, but I don't know who the specific staff were, but I know Sam would have passed that on. But Councillor Sample, did you want to list up their street trees? I think you mentioned before, or you're going to do it as a motion without notice? Because Councillor Shanks did give you an invite. Do you want to do it as a future discussion, or? Say that again? Street trees can't go on 10 years, and we can do something. I think it's important. Do you want it as a motion on notice, or do you want it as a discussion item for the future?
I actually have you down here as a motion without notice, and I was going to come back to you, Councillor Sample, if you did actually want to do something there. So, Sam, you'd like to provide a comment?
If I may, Chair, there's been some conversation in regards to trees. Certainly the intent of the beautification plan will look at this particular matter. We'll look at specific beautification of various town entries and look at potentially some drastic approaches to achieving that. So I welcome the discussion, hopefully, at the December IES.
Thank you, Sam. Any other items listed for discussion at future meetings? Elected members, Cody, Councillor Davies.
Yeah, just maybe a report on the toilet infrastructure around the town. I just know it's been a popular topic of discussion over the last week or so about where toilets are and how many there are and how close they are, etc. So I'd just like to see some further information come back about just the overall plans in that regard.
Is that more of a, is that a motion without notice, Councillor Davies? I think
it's, yeah, well, whatever, however it works. I mean, it can be a.
If you are happy, I might take that out of the items list for discussion, and we might address it in motions without notice. If you're happy with that, yep. So any other items listed for discussion, knowing that we do have motions without notice to get to for actions, discussion items only. Okay, moving on. Questions without notice. Councillor Sample.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, two questions. There was a very ugly looking incident that happened with our famous man that lives on Cheek Avenue on last Friday, with the fire brigade, with the police, with the ambulance, smoke going everywhere. All the people in the area to do something about it.
I've got some bumper stickers out.
I would like to ask, if it's possible, that either senior management or CEO could tell us what happened on Friday with all this incident to do with resident road park, or probably don't pay roads, but that there's a Cheek Avenue, and when are we going to clean that area up? And I mean clean it up, not just go there, take the rubbish bins away and all the ugly signs and so forth. So that's my question, one question on that.
Mr. Viney.
Look, I have to take that on notice. I'm not aware of the incident, and I will look into that and get back to you.
Did you have a second question?
Yes, well, my second question is, Councillor Davies, you'll bring up about the smelly business of toilets. I'll leave it till then. Thank you. So I'll check that.
Any other questions without notice, elected members? Councillor Tooley.
Yeah, just a bit of clarity about the Gawler Link Road opening. About a week ago, there was a bus tour. Poor old Sam got hit with disgusting heavy rain. And then the next thing, I got a feed in my Facebook that says, here's a photo in the messenger of an opening, and there's a red ribbon. And there's, you're wearing a fedora or something on that end. I think Mr. and Nat is at that end. Warwick Mittiger, the mayor, Member Schubert. And then there's an assortment of people. Was that, did I miss something? Was that the official ribbon cutting opening? And then it said on 2 p.m. on Sunday, the road will open. So I thought there was going to be a big fireworks display and sausage sizzle for the official ribbon, but it's happened, has it? Has it come and gone and that's it? You're smiling. Tell us what it meant, because none of us were there.
I might put that through to the CEO or the mayor.
Yeah, through the chair. Suffice to say that the steps that we've taken relative to the tour by the elected members, the bus tour, in anticipation of when the road was going to be open or not open, and it's been a little bit of a moving feast, was deliberate to ensure that the elected members had an opportunity to see the road before it was open to the public. Okay, and I understand, although I wasn't there, I understand it went well, and it was sort of a valuable opportunity. It's fair to say that there's been some uncertainty about when the official opening was then going to occur, and the message from the state government was they weren't wanting it to be anything elaborate. They were wanting it to be a soft open. The time of the actual opening, the structure of that opening was fluid, leading up to the Friday before. It happened on Monday. And we were very much told this is a state government initiative, this is a state government soft open, and yes, we were invited, the mayor had been invited to participate, say a few words, but it was very much a controlled setting, and it was a soft open. We didn't know on the Monday when the actual road was going to be opening, and we were notified today via messenger press that it was opening on Sunday. And as soon as that we found out, we circulated that information. So it's been an interesting process, put it that way.
The opening was controlled by the Department of Transport. It wasn't controlled by council. There was a media statement released, but I didn't see it until it was released. So yeah, it was rather interesting. The people that were there were Aboriginal elders. They knew a lot more than I did. I guess that's appropriate. The Graham family were there, which is also appropriate because they, there was, I did ask what the name of the bridge was going to be, but I wasn't allowed to be told. So we're waiting on approval from the language group as to what that bridge would be named. So I have to agree with you, Councillor Tooley. There's been a bit of a disconnect, which is a real shame because we're taking ownership of this road. And yeah, the local member of Light wasn't invited. The media wasn't invited until I advised the Bunyip that maybe they'd like to pick up the phone and get themselves invited. And they were then there, which is great because they are our local paper. So yeah, it was rather bizarre. But I guess that's the way the department wanted to run it. Yeah, there were a number of, Uncle Jeffrey Newchurch, Mr. Aegis, who did the smoking ceremony. I hadn't met him before. There was a smoking ceremony, and well, it wasn't our event. Again, it wasn't our event. I think it was fortunate that at least a couple of us were invited, so I think we should be grateful for that. Yeah, and it was unusual. That was the way they wanted to do it. So it was their event, not ours. It was at the bridge. That's right. There's a reflective space that's going to be developed, which I think is going to be quite beautiful. We'll find out about that, I'm sure. So I look forward to what the naming of the road will be, of the bridge will be. But yeah, look, it was a privilege to be part of it. It was very moving because the Graham family did speak, Richard and Marianne, who are the son and daughter family members of Auntie Mary Graham, or Mullamar Graham, and she was a very important woman in Gawler, and Brian knew her. And so I think that was exceptionally moving. So the actual ceremony was quite beautiful, yeah.
You've said that this was out of our hands, but I think you've just highlighted a whole lot of things that I think you should be writing a letter to say how ridiculous. You know, it's been one of the biggest contentious issues. They've spent so much money on it, and then it fizzes with this select group that none of us knows about, and you're having something like a smoking ceremony. I mean, they are typically something that are significant, and they normally get a decent amount of media. And you're talking now about reflective areas. I've never heard about this reflective area. And we've had skin in the game. It's just bizarre. Are you sleeping over to be the first to drive through at 2 o'clock on Sunday? I mean, I just don't know. We've probably passed, I don't know, motions without notice. We could make a motion that say that you write and say, tell Dip Tie off for stuff like that. Do not have our local member there. And John Dawkins not there. And
I might just move forward to motions without notice, being that may be a platform you may be looking at using, Councillor Tully. We'll feel that one out. So we'll move on to motions without notice. Councillor Sample will move on to motions without notice. Yes, Councillor Davies, if you'd like to.
Sure. So my motion is about a report coming back to the AES regarding the public toilets in the town, future strategies, as well as, you know, places where potentially more toilets could be implemented. So however the right wording is for that one.
Toilet facilities within the Gawler Township?
Yeah.
Or Gawler as a whole?
What's that? Maintenance and all that, yeah.
Regarding the toilet maintenance and facilities?
And public toilets, yeah.
So that a report be presented back to the IES regarding public toilet facilities and maintenance within the Gawler Township. Oh, sorry, including location.
Location, maintenance, and whatever you might, black spots or whatever you would want.
Accessibility.
Accessibility. Oh, gaps.
Just get rid of one of those ands, I think. Are you happy with the wording there, Councillor Davies?
Yeah, I think that's. I think that should cover most of it.
Would you like to speak to your motion?
Yeah. Look, this is just something that obviously we had a big toilet discussion last week, and since then there's been a bit of a discussion about toilets and people saying, oh, can we have 2 sets of toilets, or there's a lot of just support for people saying, oh, there's not enough toilets, or that sort of thing in the town. So I'd like to see, some structural reporting so that we can see, are there spaces where, we could use extra toilets, etc. But yeah, I think it's fairly self-explanatory. So yeah, we'll move the motion.
Do I have a seconder? Councillor Sample.
Thank you, Chairman, and I'd like to elaborate on this because of a meeting I had this morning. I was called down to the chemist shop at Woolworths car park and said, look, you seem to be making things happen. I don't know where they get that from. It never seems to happen what I asked for it, but it does happen sometime. But council has a public car park in the 4-storey car park. Guess what? It's locked. Guess what? No one can use it. Why? Secondly, Woolworths, being as huge as they are, between Woolworths, I shop Woolworths, do you all shop Woolworths? When you walk from Woolworths Food into the chemist shop, there's a little laneway there. Everybody know of it? 2 toilets there. That was part of the deal when permission was given to build Woolworths. They had to have public toilets, locked. No one's allowed to use them. So I went in, I couldn't find the manager. After the meeting, I went in to see if I could find the manager of Woolworths. He said to me, no, mate, they're public toilets, yes, but we were getting them vandalised by those idiots that sit over on the arcade all day without their shirts on and tomahawks in their push bike backs and lay all over the seats so nobody else can do. And they come over and they make a huge mess. So we're sick of it, we shut it. So the Business Development Board says between 80 and 90,000 people come to Gawler to shop. When they go into Woolworths, you know, big area, they park in the 4-storey car park. Oh, hell, I've been driving all day. Where am I going to do it, right? The car park, the toilet that's provided, that council put in that car park is locked. No one can use it, okay? That's number one. Why and why isn't it open? The toilets at Woolworths, when they got the planning for their building, had to have 2 public toilets, right? And it amazes me a bit because there's no disabled toilet there. How they got away with that, I don't know. Some planner must have been asleep. But basically, there needs to be something done about that because they should be open. The people that work in the chemist shop, they go to the hotel. So I went to Gianetta and said to Gianetta, if you have a bit of trouble with your dunnies getting used to it, I said, mate, we don't know who they are, but they just keep coming in because everybody sends us into the pump here. Or we go to, there must be a coffee shop there somewhere that's got a toilet facility nearby, you coffee holics in there. But they're using these other people. But I want to know why, and maybe it should come up through this, why is our public toilet, which we have to have, locks on it? And if it's because of vandalism or whatever it may be, put a bloody security guard on it and or do something. But we have to offer this. You know what the ladies in the chemist shop said? We have to tell them to walk down the Walker Place toilets. Is that a joke or what? But that's what's happening, and that's what I met this morning, and that's what came out of it. And the pub and some other little shop must have a toilet somewhere there. I'm sorry, I don't go into the shops there, but is there a coffee shop there that's got a toilet? I don't know. Somebody will find out. And why Woolworths don't have their public toilets open, I don't know. So I totally second this and support it. We've got to do something about this because everybody gets caught short. I was watching telly last night. A fella decided to pull over on the side of the road and do what he had to do and so forth and got fined $300 for hanging it out next to the back of the car on the road. So where do people go when they drive all the way into our beautiful town and they want to go to the toilet? She's like, just go down to those toilets down there at Clonley, at Walker Place. That's a joke, sorry. And we've got to do something about it. This is urgent, smelly business, really.
Well, I don't know if they still do, but they did have all their toilets locked as well because of COVID. Is that still happening?
Yes, Jack is nodding, saying yes, it is happening. Yep. So any further discussion on Councillor Davies' motion? Councillor Torley.
Yes, totally support the motion. Totally endorse Councillor Samuel's enthusiasm. It's just not acceptable to say, well, because of vandalism, we'll shut things down. When you run a school, you go through these phases where your toilets get trashed. It's what year 9s do, it's what year 8s do. They go through these phases and you're not allowed just to shut the toilets to punish the naughty 1 or 2 kids that are doing it. You have to find a way to solve it. And you can't put cameras inside, but you work out a strategy. We used to put cameras on the outside. And we told teachers, you must record every kid that leaves your class so you know if they're going to the toilet. You can't stop them going, but you make a note when they went, when they came back. And eventually you can tag and find the culprit. And that's the sort of solutions you've got to do. You can't just punish 99% of the population because, you know, a very small percentage are getting it wrong. You have to target the percentage that are getting it wrong. So totally I agree with the motion, totally support the enthusiasm. And I've said this before, you know, many towns, when you travel, people know where the good toilets are, and that's where they'll go, and they'll stop and they'll spend their money and they'll buy a coffee and buy something else because they've got some decent toilets in them. And it may come back before us again, but, you know, if they've got to walk all the way down to Walker Place, well, that won't happen. They'll be walking all the way down to Apex Park because under the current plan, Walker Place will go. Whereas this plan might help us, and there may be a motion coming up that says we keep both. If we're going to keep the ones down at Apex Park, maybe we repurpose the ones that we've got at Walker Place so they serve the needs of people central. I was speaking to some business people the other day. They can't believe that we're going to get rid of those ones. They agree they need some work, but there's, you know, these are business people in the main street that have been here for a long time. People popping in, where's the local toilet? Where's the local toilet? The ones at Walker Place are central. And if they were upgraded at not too much cost, then we provide, again, a facility for our growing population. And finally, Brian, Jim is going to contest that $300 fine.
So we know who was hanging it out then, obviously. Any further discussion? There be none, I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Councillor Tooley, you had a motion without notice?
I'm happy to get some help with this, but it's along the lines of my little whinge before. It goes something like this. The council registers its disappointment at how the opening of the Gawler East Link Road was handled, and that the mayor is authorised to write to, are they still called DIPT or DP?
No, the DIT, D-I-T.
Okay, DIT, on council's behalf to register our disappointment. Didn't capture that? They used to teach shorthand in schools. I'm more than happy if people can see an improvement in the wording.
So just off the top of my head, I was just going to say that council register its disappointment with the DIT on how the opening of the Gawler Link Road was handled, and then a second point that council, that the mayor be authorised to write to DIT on council's behalf. I think just putting DIT in there a couple of times really sort of hones in on the fact that it had nothing to do with us.
Yep.
So that would mean that the and between handled and that drops out and it becomes a 2-point. Are you happy with how that sits, Councillor Tooley? Would you like to speak to your motion? You don't want to finish off your rant? Okay, this is first. Do I have a seconder for that motion? Councillor Fraser, would you like to speak? No? Any further discussion? Councillor Koch.
Against this motion. I went on the tour the other day and got a really good insight into the whole road. We looked at the reflection point at the bridge, and one thing that really struck me, I mean, it's a great road, it's going to be a fantastic asset, but it's really basically still a construction site. So it was probably appropriate, well, it was probably appropriate that the opening actually happened at the bridge, because that's the most significant point on the road. And I can just understand how it's so difficult for a lot of people to be there when it's basically a construction zone. Looking at the pictures, it looks like it was a very respectful and honourable opening, and it was obviously the level and the tone that the department wanted for the time. And I'm quite happy that we were appropriately represented. And I think this is a little bit petty. But anyway, I'm going to vote against this. Thank you.
Mayor Redmond.
I'm going to vote against it as well. Appreciate that elected members are disappointed that there was no invitation or great fanfare. However, I think we risk upsetting a lot of Aboriginal people. They found this ceremony really moving and really important for healing. There's some major Aboriginal sacred sites along the South Para River. The mural that we were all invited to see on the bus tour a week ago is quite outstanding, and it's a credit to DIT through their Aboriginal landscape gardener that made that happen. So I think we risk doing more damage than good. I appreciate that we get disappointed. You know, it will be our road. Sometimes I think we need to move on and not create problems where they don't exist. So I appreciate the sentiment. I don't disagree with it, but I think that to write a letter is creating division where we don't need division. We need to move on, and we need to embrace this road and this development. And I can tell you that the Aboriginal people that were there again found they were very well respected, and I think the focus was very much on them, which I also respect. So sometimes, you know, we don't always get our own way, but sometimes we just need to move on. So I just can't support this. I'm happy to write the letter because I'm sure it'll get up, but you know, I'll do what I'm told. But yeah, I think it can cause more troubles than you know. I think we should be bringing and working with DIT and building bridges. This has been quite a challenging project for them, and I think we've got an opportunity to work closely with them on future projects. So I again appreciate their sentiment. I understand the disappointment, but I think we could, yeah, I think we should move on from that.
Councillor Samble.
I don't agree a lot with what you said, Mayor Karen. I certainly don't agree with what you said, Councillor Koch. I believe this is the biggest insult I've ever seen after being in council as mayor and now as a councillor. On the bus when Andy Pandy and Shannon were giving us a story about this and so forth, a question was asked to them, when is this going to be officially open? His words were, there is no date set. Surely to goodness, there was only elected members on that. Jim, did you hear him say anything about when there was going to be any opening ceremony? Because I heard that he indicated that it would not be for at least 2 or 3 weeks. And then all of this happened, and we as elected members are mushrooms. because nothing was said. If we'd have got a text or an email to say what was happening, then that wouldn't have been much of an insult. I am absolutely bloody insulted. $21,000 for 20 trees, I will never ever forget, you know, and I'm sorry, Dip Ty have pushed this council around left, right and centre all the way down the line, and as far as I'm concerned, it's a bloody insult to me as an elected member, to every other elected member and to the community of Gawler. So I will ask people to support this motion.
Further discussion? Councillor Vallelonga.
Yeah, I will support it. I just want to say a couple of things. I'm actually disappointed on the road. I think it's I wouldn't call it a highway. It's I'm not too sure if Sam can answer it, but it's only a 50k road. I was so disappointed in it. It's only a 50k road, and not only that too, if somebody is too skinny, if somebody packs up and their car has to come off the road, they can't come off the road. So I don't think Dip Ty's done us a favour. It's not a major highway, and I'm really disappointed in it.
Thank you, Councillor Vallelonga. Any further discussion? There be none. Councillor Tooley, would you like to close the debate?
Yep, and I totally agree with what Councillor Samble has said. I couldn't make the tour. To say that the motion I put forward is, I know there's been two speakers to say that it's degrading what happened and that it's disrespecting Aboriginal people. That statement is offensive to me. That is not the intention of my motion, neither is it in that motion. I am not offended for the people who were there. I am not in any way casting aspersions on anybody. What bit of my motion there is disrespectful to Aboriginal people? How can you say that, mate? To say to Dip Ty we're not happy does not say that we didn't like the smoking ceremony, does not mean that we didn't want Aboriginal people there. Rubbish. Not saying that at all. I just wish there was more of them there. I just wish there was more of us there. I just wish there was more of a sense of ceremony. The money that we've spent.
So, Councillor Tooley, you've called a point of order. Councillor Koch, sorry, can you put your microphone on there? Okay.
I just request that Councillor Tooley stop yelling at people.
You've called a point of order. You've called it for what, sorry? Because of the volume?
Yes, and just being disrespectful and yelling. Being disrespectful.
Yeah, sorry, I'm not going to withhold that. He was speaking robustly, as we're elected to do. He's passionate about this item. He'd probably be finished by now, to be honest. So thanks for holding us up a little bit there. But Councillor Tooley, as you were.
Thank you very much. Because that offends me, the implication that somehow in my motion, I am trying to disrespect Aboriginal people or the events that happened. Not at all. I think it's fantastic for those that were there and had that opportunity. My point is, this should have been broader. It should have been announced. There should have been a sense of ceremony that we could have been involved in and participated in. That's the essence that I want us to write the letter. And if the Mayor is more than happy to do a draft and send it back to us and we can give feedback so that we make sure that the appropriate wording is in there. Because it is not to say to Dip Ty anything that what they did was in any way wrong. It just was not enough. It wasn't well announced. It wasn't well timed. We didn't have a chance to be involved in it. And we were all, as Councillor Sample said, acknowledged by Councillor Vallelonga, that there was an anticipation that this was coming up in about 3 weeks' time. Therefore, there was thinking in people's heads that the day is coming. That was my thinking. And then I get the email and says, well, it's already happened. There's a photograph. And I'm, who's that? And then on Sunday, they'll open up and go through. I just think that's a fizzer. A fizzer. And particularly when we spent so much money and we want people to be proud of it, you know, we fought to get that roundabout off Potts changed. We wanted to go to Tiver. We couldn't go to Tiver, but we put in a shape to that roundabout so that a future to Tiver could happen. There's been modifications at the other end. There's been the bridge design. All of those things are points for the community to be brought along with. That's the point of my motion.
Thank you, Councillor Tooley. Yeah, just to add a little bit there, I know I'm the chair, but I wouldn't mind just giving my 2 cents on it. However, the debate is closed. You are correct, Mayor Redmond. So I'll put that motion. All those in favour? All those against? Sorry, can we just go one more time? All those in favour? And all those against? Oh, we're tired. So it just lays on the table. Oh, the vote is tied and it sits at that. Okay. So how do you advance? Okay. All right. And the vote is tied. Okay, interesting item, that one. Any other motions without notice, elected members? About any trees in Glendock Road? Nothing. So being that there's no more motions without notice, we bring the meeting to a close. Thank you very much, elected members. Very interesting conversations, and thank you for bearing with me. Thank you.